Hi, and welcome to this week's episode of BariAftercare, the podcast. We completed episode 200 last week, so we're going to move on to another 200, one at a time, right? Stick with the process, I always say. Last week, when I was recording the episode about intuitive eating, I came across a passage in the book that I'd been referring to, and it sparked the idea for this week's podcast. What I read in the intuitive eating book was in relation to how people sometimes don't trust themselves when it comes to food. And I have found this to be very true in my work in this field in the last 20 years. Some people don't trust themselves to choose healthy foods that are going to meet their body's needs for nutrition. Sometimes people don't trust themselves to stop eating when they are satisfied or even when they're full. Some people don't trust themselves to go into a store, a grocery store, and not walk out with a whole bunch of things that were not on their list and maybe trigger foods for them. So those kinds of things are not in line with a person's healthy lifestyle goals. The ways people don't trust themselves around food are many. What I specifically read in the book that I was talking about by Evelyn Tribole and Elise Resch that sparked the topic for this episode was this: don't underestimate the profound impact that self-trust can have. That really grabbed my attention simply because what I stated to you just a minute ago, so many people that I have worked with over the last 20 years really don't trust themselves to follow through in the long run. Maybe they trust themselves when they first start a new lifestyle program or a diet, which we don't do diets anymore, right? We threw diets out the window. It's hard to refrain from a diet mentality when you've lived it for a long time. But there's a really famous psychoanalyst, and the authors of this intuitive eating book mentioned him because in relation to this topic of self-trust and the profound impact that having trust in self or not having self in trust can have in your life in relation to food and a number of other things in our lives. So they talk about this psychoanalyst named Erik Erikson. When I was in school, my master's, my PhD, we studied a great deal about Erik Erikson because he has this theory of lifespan development. In fact, his entire career pretty much was focused on human development. The discussion in the intuitive eating book focused on one of his first developmental stages of life and how even a very young child can develop a lack of trust around food. That lack of trust developed at a very early age can have a huge impact throughout their entire life. So in today's episode, I'm going to share with you what these 8 stages of Erik Erikson's theory are about how people develop emotionally and socially. There's a new word. People are mashing words all the time, right? How people develop emotionally and socially over the course of their lives. And because this podcast is about food and our relationship with food, we're going to tailor the discussion of each one of the 8 developmental stages to what happens if a person successfully navigates through one stage of development, or what might happen if they don't successfully navigate through a particular stage of development. This may not make sense right now, but hang with me because it'll all fall into place. And honestly, I love Erik Erikson's stages of development. And when I was very young and in therapy of my own, I remember going to a workshop that my therapist did about how critically important these stages of development are for a person. And how things can really get messed up as far as how you feel about yourself and how you view yourself in society. So also from my work in this bariatric field, I know that a lot of people, not just bariatrics, but most people in the world, right, struggle to some degree with their sense of fitting in, how they feel a part of, how they feel like other people accept them or not. So people who have the disease of obesity have oftentimes been shunned by the public more so than other people. So this is a very relevant topic, and I want you to listen with an open mind and an open ear and just learn something, because whether you apply this to your life with food or not, it's really interesting stuff, and it applies to everything in our lives. And just for the record, this information, this theory of Erik Erikson's, has been very well studied, very well researched, and for the most part, it has received great recognition. It's found to be quite valid. So, overview. We're going to talk about what these stages of development are, and every human, which includes you and me, goes through these stages, at least according to Erikson, but I think you'll find them to be very, very familiar in terms of what we learn and how we developed. And the good news is, if we don't successfully navigate through a particular stage, we can learn the skills later in life. So it's not, oh my God, all is lost. We'll never be able to catch up and be a fully healthy social and emotional being. No, we can learn the skills that we needed that maybe we didn't learn along the way at a later stage. Then we're going to talk about how each of these 8 stages relates to our relationship with food. And we all have a relationship with food. Some of it's healthy, some of it's unhealthy, and each person may be closer to one extreme or the other. And then we're going to talk about, if we didn't navigate successfully through one of these stages, and especially if it relates to food, how can we resolve what we missed? How can we learn what we didn't learn at the age when we are supposed to learn these things? So let's get on with it. All right, the first stage, what he's done is he's broken up our lifespan from birth to death into these 8 age ranges. And in each of these ranges, which he's calling developmental stages, people need to master a task that's necessary to create a foundation for having a healthy social and emotional life as you continue to grow. So when a task is learned, you know, you're pretty solid in that task. And again, bear with me, it'll make more sense in just a minute. And you've kind of mastered this. And the more we master these tasks at an early age, the more equipped we are to be our healthiest selves. Well, look around you, friends. The adult population in our society is not all that emotionally and socially healthy. So apparently a lot of us missed some of these opportunities along the way, but we can make them up. So there's no giving up here. But the development of a healthy personality and a sense of competence. I believe in myself. I have a lot of self-esteem. I take initiative. I go out there and I make things happen. I get things done. You know, depends on successful completion of each task. So maybe at this point you're already going, oh, geez. As was I. You know, initially when I first learned about these stages of development, I was like, oh, God. I was in probably in my early 30s, and I'm like, I clearly missed out on some of this stuff. But the good news is, over the last 30 years, I've picked up on some of it too. So no losing hope. And Erikson himself had a very optimistic approach to this, a very optimistic outlook. He's like, you know what? You can learn things along the way. These childhood crises, as he referred to them, can be resolved at any time in life. So if you look back over your relationship with food and your eating signals and, you know, it's like, I I don't make very good choices. I'm not very good about trusting myself in these areas with food. Don't worry. We can help with that. And that's what we're going to talk about last. But let's get into these 8 stages. Relate it to your relationship with food. And remember, the ones that we develop on early form the foundation for how we grow over time. All right, so the first stage of life, according to Erickson, is birth through the first year of life. Very short stage of life, and this is infancy, right? The developmental task, what we need to learn at this stage of development is trust. So if we are successful in this stage, and I'll tell you how you either are or are not successful because it has nothing to do with you. If you get through this stage successfully, you will have developed a sense of trust, not just in yourself, but in the world at large and other people. If you are not given what you need to successfully navigate this stage, you go into the next stage with a sense of mistrust. So how does this happen? Well, think about it. An infant, from the time you're born until, about a year and a half, you have to be cared for almost 100% by other people. So who are those other people? Maybe your parents, maybe the babysitter, maybe a nanny, maybe the grandparents, maybe the people at the daycare. So it's not anything we do or don't do during this stage that determines whether or not we're going to start our lives with a sense of trust or mistrust. It's how we're cared for by others. So, because infants are 100% dependent and must rely on others for every single basic need, their physiological, their comfort. So if you've got a caregiver who meets the needs of a child and instills this sense of trust, I'm here when you need me, I'm here when you need me. The people who care for you, their responsiveness signals to the child that you can either trust me, you can trust that your needs are going to be taken care of, or maybe you learn you can't. So let's break this down. If an infant is hungry, they cry. So if a caregiver, a parent, or whomever it is responsive and feeds the baby learns to trust that when I have a need, it will be taken care of. I can trust that my needs will be met. I can trust that other people are there for me. The world is trustworthy because you're completely dependent on other people. When a baby has a wet diaper, it cries, and if it's not time to feed and the baby gets its diaper changed, again, I learn that I can trust. If the baby's upset or just, is a little colicky, and the caregivers nurture and snuggle and smile and coo at the baby and play with the baby, then babies learn to have trust in people and they learn to have trust in the world. Babies learn that they can trust it's going to be fed, it's going to be cared for, it's going to be nurtured. That's what a child needs in the first year and a half of life. So hopefully, most of us had that, but let's think about when that might not happen. Because if a parent or caregiver does not tend to a child, does not feed it on a regular schedule, does not provide comfort, leaves the baby in a dirty diaper, doesn't play with it or care for it or whatever, a child is left frightened, insecure, not trusting. Nobody's caring for me. This can have a profound impact on whether or not you can have healthy relationships later in life. So what would cause something like that? So let's say that you've got, a caregiver who is unavailable or is, depressed or is having severe postpartum or is not prepared. Let's say you have a young teen parent whose parents are like, hey, it's your kid, you take care of it. But the child parent is ill-equipped. They don't know how to do this. They've not been taught. Or let's say that a baby is not wanted, or that the baby is brought home to a household where there's a lot of chaos, or there's, issues in the relationship between the adults in the house, or maybe there, are drugs happening, or there is domestic violence, or whatever. In a situation where a baby is not taken care of when they need to be, and we've all heard these stories on the news. Maybe you experienced it yourself as a baby, or maybe you experienced it, you were the parent who didn't necessarily attend. This is not about guilting anyone. It's just about saying, this isn't about the infant. This is about the care or the lack of care that the child received. And if a child did not receive the care it needed, it starts out into the world with an insecure kind of attachment, a lack of trust that it's going to be cared for. And you can bet this is not a time in our life that we can remember. We can't say, yeah, I remember laying in my crib and crying for 2 hours. But that sense of there's nobody caring for me lives within. It's a distrust. Now let's talk about the relationship with food at this first stage, because it makes sense that if you're fed on a regular schedule, that a baby would trust that food's going to be available, right? Not only can you trust the caregiver, but food is going to be made available to me. So you have a secure sense that food is available. But if a baby's not fed on schedule, or goes hungry for a long time, or the caregiver doesn't provide those needs, this is going to translate into a lack of trust, not only for others, but it could, I don't know, this is a speculation just on my part, but it could be that an infant develops this internal sense of food insecurity, and it could begin that early in life. Now, we're not going to be able to do talk therapy and figure this out with a person, right? But if there's a food insecurity or a lack of trust about people, it could have begun that early in life. So that is the first developmental stage. And that is why child care, infant care is so critical. It really sets the tone for how a child is going to approach the world in many, many ways. So we need not minimize this. It's critical. Now, the second stage of development, according to Erickson, is between the ages of 1 and 3. And what are these little toddlers known for? No, I can do it myself. Well, there's a reason for that, because it's during the ages of 1 to 3 that a child needs to develop independence in a lot of different tasks. That is the task to be mastered between 1 and 3, developing independence. And if a child is allowed to make some decisions, to make some mistakes, to do some trial and error, as long as it's in a safe way, they develop a sense of autonomy, which means independence. So parents need to give children a little bit of room to fall down, make some basic choices, like, would you like your bedtime story before you brush your teeth or after you brush your teeth? Would you like to put on your shoes first or your coat first? These are the kinds of things, a little bit of independence, so that a child believes, I can do this by myself. And healthy parents will give children choices, not a choice, do you want to brush your teeth or not? So the parent is really in charge here. You're going to brush your teeth. The choice is, do you want to do it before or after your bedtime story? And that's how we teach children independence and autonomy. So they either have a sense of trust from the beginning, and now we're giving them chances to develop further trust in themselves. have a little bit of independence. Now, if they don't master this, and I'll tell you how that might happen, they're going to start to develop a sense of shame and doubt. Remember, the definition of shame is I'm not good enough. I'm not okay. Something's wrong with me. This, again, doesn't happen because of anything inherent to the child. It's about how they're cared for. So let's talk about this. So a child starts to walk and talk between 1 and 3. And they develop this curiosity. They want to go out and they want to try and they want to do for themselves. And this quest for independence or autonomy kind of replaces that concern for trust. I've either developed that trust or not. It's with me or it's not, but I'm moving on. Now I'm going to explore the world a little bit. So kids who have this secure attachment and a sense of trust and have learned that, you know what, my basic needs are going to be met, because they learned that in that first developmental stage. Now, I feel safe to wander off from my parent, not roaming the malls, but in the living room. And I can go over there and I can try that button. And I can go over there and I can pick that book up off the shelf. And I can, they establish themselves as independent from mom or dad. Now, if the child did not develop trust in that first stage, if their parent did not meet their needs, that kid may be kind of clingy, like, don't leave me, don't leave me, don't leave me. I'm afraid you're going to leave me and not come back. These things are important, right? But a toddler's job is to assert their own will. And parents need to let this happen to a healthy extent. Kids are going to test the limit. Can I touch this? Can I say that? Can I explore this area of the house? And Erickson believed that toddlers need to be encouraged to explore. Go on, try that, touch that, play with that, push the buttons, as long as they're safe, right? You got to have safety so that as they're encouraged to explore and touch the buttons and try the shoestrings and try the zippers, they develop this sense of, look at me. I'm all independent. I can do this myself. Or maybe I can. Maybe the kid gets frustrated and asks for help. But they develop the self-esteem, the sense of initiative. They start to develop confidence. However, this can be squelched if a parent is too impatient or too anxious about fear. Oh my God, don't walk over there. You might, step on a piece of sand. They're overly cautious, overly controlling. Parents do not allow their children, not intentionally, that's not their intention, but being too cautious with the child at this age will instill a sense of shame. Oh, there's something wrong with me. I can't do that. Oh, being told no, you can't do that. No, without some realistic exploration, leaves the child feeling doubtful about themselves, which is about shame. They don't trust me. I'm not good enough. Something's wrong with me. And that is not how we want to start our children's lives. So being overly critical, oh, you can't do that. Stop it. Bring that over here. You're not supposed to, very controlling. Kids are supposed to make mistakes and they're supposed to be encouraged. Like, okay, let's try that again, right? You want to keep kids safe, but you want to validate their need for exploration, their need for independence, learn by doing. So again, it's not anything wrong with the child, whether they succeed at this task or not. It's, again, the caregivers. So we are very shaped by the people who raise us, for better or worse. And again, most parents who stray from what is best for the child don't do it intentionally. It's either because they themselves are ill-equipped, or they're frightened, or they're got too much going on out there to give the kid what they need. Either way, it happens. Now let's look at food at this terrible twos stage between 1 and 3. If parents let their kids attempt to feed themselves, right? They're going to mash it all in their face. Half of it's going to be in their hair. It always requires a bath after mealtime. If they make a huge mess, we'll only end up eating half of their food. You know what? but their parents are okay with that, that's a good thing, right? It teaches the child, I can do this. I can do it by myself. And that's what they need to learn at this stage, because that is what develops that sense of independence and autonomy. And later in life, they're willing to try new things. They're willing to explore. They're willing to make mistakes. They're willing to see what they can do, test their limits. So even the smallest thing, giving them the opportunity to feed themselves, fosters this sense of, I got this, I can do this. And then as they grow, again, they're going to believe that they can do these things. Now, if parents don't let kids try a spoon or allow them to eat with their fingers and make a mess, the kid, even though they may not be told this explicitly, is going to get the feeling, well, I can't do this. You know, they don't trust me to do this. Obviously, they don't have those words at that time, but they just know that I can't do it. Somebody's going to do it for me. And in that kind of upbringing, you're not going to develop a sense of, let me try it at least. It's okay if I fail. Let me try again. What they learn is, somebody's going to do everything for me. Not a good thing. And this can be the beginning of that sense of shame. I'm not capable. I'm not good enough. You don't believe in me. And the feeling and that belief can stay buried within this person. And later it's going to translate in their life to, I don't feel capable. I don't think I'm going to try that. I'm going to let somebody else do that for me, because they just didn't learn to be given the opportunity, or to make mistakes, or to, make a mess of things and develop that sense of, I really can do this. And this may include not having the sense of that independence to follow through with making good choices for their lives, because when people don't feel good about themselves on the inside, they don't often treat themselves that well on the outside. But that will happen later in life. But it could be a reflection of this early stage of development. So if food becomes a battleground at this early age of toddlerhood, between 1 and 3, that is when there's going to be a lot of a lack of trust in yourself. So you want to try something and mom says, no, you can't have that. Or you want to feed yourself and then you learn not to trust yourself with food. And that could translate to not trusting yourself to buy the right foods, or not trusting yourself, the whole I can't be trusted around food message. It can become compounded if maybe later your parents put you on diets, right, at a later stage of development. But now, as a toddler, you've already been given the message, subtly or not so subtly, that I will choose your foods, you will eat what I give you, you are allowed no preferences. So you don't learn to trust your sense of what you like, how much is enough. And then if later in life, you get the Clean Your Plate Club and you're going on a diet, you really lose your sense of trust for yourself where food is concerned. And this applies to everything else in life too, but we're tailoring each of these stages to food. But they're also related to friendships and respect toward elders and how you interact with other people, whether you're allowed to go off and, trick or treat while your parents watch from afar, or if they got to hold your hand all the way up to the door. All right, third developmental stages is between the ages of 3 and 6 and is called early childhood. Now, what you're supposed to learn at this stage is to take some initiative on some activities, right? And depending on how this is handled, whether or not you're allowed to take some initiative in tasks, a person learns either to have this sense of initiative, like I'm going to go out there and I'm going to check this out. I'm going to try it, see if I like it. Or if they're not allowed to try things, they might start to develop a sense of guilt. So let's explore this a little bit. All right, so think of, a child between 3 and 6. They start to have some ideas. And they say things that might not make any sense or not, or they may initiate action, like they're gonna go cook the eggs. And if if the parents are like, no, you're not doing that, get down. But if the parent says, here, sit up here on the counter, you can help me. You're encouraging the child to take initiative. If the kid wants to go get some art supplies and paint, and the parent says, no, I don't want you to make a mess, boom, you're shutting down that sense of initiative. Or if a child wants to, get all their stuffed animals out and play school, what are you doing? That is so stupid. Don't make a mess in this house. If children are allowed to be creative and make things up, have a lemonade stand, create things. I remember one time my grandkids were over here and they wanted to make I don't know, was it chipmunk trap or whatever it is. And, all of a sudden we're cutting up cardboard boxes and whatever. And I didn't have time for any of that. But you know what? We did it. And one time I was over at their house and they were going to make slushies and sell them for a penny. So we made slushies and they sold them for a penny. So if kids are allowed to be creative and initiate things and they're encouraged, they develop this initiative, this sense of ambition, this sense of responsibility, because I'm going to count those pennies I made from these drinks. So if a child is allowed to explore, of course within limits, keeping them safe, then they learn a lot. But if kids are shut down, if their curious questions are not answered, if their curiosity and their imaginations are not fostered, these kids are going to start to close in on themselves. They're going to stop sharing. They're going to stop taking initiative. And those who are not given these opportunities and are not successful at this stage because of over-controlling parents, they develop feelings of inadequacy. It's like, I'm not capable. So we've got these stages building one upon another, and we're either growing a confident, willing to try, independent little person, or we're shutting them down. And that kid doesn't trust themselves. They don't ask for things. They stop being creative. And again, my friends, this is nothing we did. It's who was around us. So, but the good news is we can change this all later, right? But when it comes to food at this early childhood stage, again, are you allowed to make selections? Do you get a preference? I don't like that food. Not that they need to make 3 meals for everybody in the house, but, I don't like whatever it is. Well, here, you can have peanut butter sandwich instead. So it's not a big, hairy deal. Somebody told me one time to always have peanut butter and bread as an option. You make one meal, and if the kids don't like it, this is your other option. So it does allow them to say, I just don't like this, instead of having to eat everything on your plate. Now, if you have parents who set you up for the Clean Your Plate Club and eat everything on that plate, well, you are developing kids who feel guilty when they don't eat all of their food, or feel angry because they were forced to do something they didn't want to do, like eat things they couldn't stand. This can lead to, I'm going to sneak food. Or if there's no sugar allowed in this house, well, guess what? They're going to be trading lunches at school, and they're going to be finding ways, right? So you want to give children options and recognize their preferences and not make them clean their plates, because that's where problems come in, and many of you know these things. All right, the 4th developmental stage happens between 7 and 11. Now we got a kid who, should be getting up, fixing their own breakfast, getting their own clothes ready for school, taking initiative to do their homework, with some reminders, of course. But the task at this age, which is called middle childhood, according to Erickson, is to learn to develop confidence in their abilities. So I don't need you to pick up my clothes, Mom. I can pick up my own clothes. I don't need you to make my lunch. I can make my own lunch. But again, if we have over-controlling parents who don't, A, expect their kids to do some things, or B, give them permission to do some of these things on their own, you're going to have a child who's going to feel inferior. I'm incapable of making my own lunch. I can't apparently make good choices for myself because my mom does every single thing for me. She picks out my clothes, she packs my lunches, she buys my shoes, and the kid has no input. You are creating a child who is going to be incapable of caring for themselves and making good decisions in the future in all kinds of areas. And these are coddled children, and that does not make for a good adult, a capable adult. So between 7 and 11, they need to have chores. They need to be expected to be a member of the family, do things just because you're a member of that family, so that they develop this sense of industry. You know what? It matters what I do. It matters that I cooperate to the good of the whole. And they do that at schools too, right? You have the line leader and you got the person who takes, count of who's not there, and you've got, different roles because we have to become industrious. We are part of something and we need to be capable of taking a job and doing it. Otherwise, we become inferior. So, according to Erickson, children in middle and late childhood are very busy with what he calls being industrious. They're busy. They're playing, they're planning, they're still creative, they're getting together with their friends, they're participating in sports, they're learning. Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. It's an active time when they're gaining a sense of how they measure up with their peers. This can be a very, very difficult time for kids because, as you and I know, during this time there's a lot of bullying of kids, there's a lot of making fun of kids, so if a kid hasn't developed these earlier stages where they feel trust and they feel like they can take some initiative and they can make some decisions, they're going to become more and more and more inwardly focused, less confident, less secure, more filled with shame. So if children are encouraged, not just at home, but at school and in their little activities with sports and scouts and whatever they're involved in, if they're allowed to be industrious, you know what? I'd like to be the treasurer. I'd like to be the one taking notes. And if you have family meetings, which is a whole nother topic, it's a really great way to help kids develop this sense of industriousness. They're going to develop a sense of confidence, not just for now, but also for future challenges. But this is such a critical time. And some kids, if they feel like they're not measuring up, and there's a lot of social comparison going on at this stage, they can really start to feel inferior. They can really develop this sense of self-doubt. And that's another reason parents are being encouraged to keep children off of all social media during these years, because there's already too much social comparison. And kids can develop a really big sense of inferiority, and this can last into adulthood. Now, that is not a good place to be. So how do we successfully help children to navigate through this stage? We encourage them. Explore your abilities. Oh, you want to try the violin? Check it out. Oh, you want to try chorus? Go for it. You want to try ping pong? Try it out. You want to try soccer? Try it out. You want to be in a play? Let's check it out. Let them try things. A lot of parents are like, no, you can't do that because now there are finances for a lot of people, and that makes it very difficult. But there are also a lot of good community activities that cost very little or nothing. So, even though there's a discrepancy between what some people have access to and others do not, there are usually community programs that are open to anybody. And even if it's not an involvement with something outside, you know what? I'd like to try to learn to cook, or you know what? I'd like to try to learn to sew, or I'd like to, try this craft that they can do at home, and it shouldn't cost that much. Kids need to be given authentic feedback, right? We don't need to call them a failure, but they need to learn that failing at something isn't a horrible thing. My son loved Sports. Love, 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 love sports. He's got 2 sons. One of them is horrible at sports. And my son has always been the coach. But you know what? When my grandson got into the 3rd grade, he told his mom and dad he no longer wanted to play Little League Baseball. And they were fine with it, which is a gift, right? That he was able to say that, and they said, that's fine. He loves academic things. They have him in the science fair, they have him in the spelling bee, they have him in the, the geography. That's his jam. So encourage your kids to do what they love to do, and don't force them to do things you love, but they may not. Now let's think about food at this stage of middle childhood. Depending on how they're already feeling about themselves, right? Have they developed a sense of trust? Have they developed a sense of autonomy? Do they feel independent? Do they take initiative? They might want to start cooking things. If they cook things for the family and the family makes fun of them, again, it's going to be very humiliating. But if the family's like, oh, that's awesome, next time let's try this, or do it with them. Same grandson. That child, his mom is so great about, he made a pumpkin cheesecake. I was like, you've got to be kidding me. That is impressive. So they experiment, they try different things, they try different ethnic foods. So encourage, encourage, encourage. Now, if you've got a child who hasn't successfully navigated, for whatever reason, some of those earlier stages, they might not be feeling too good about themselves. And this is a time when kids can develop some sneaky eating, or using food to comfort themselves, or because they're not feeling included by their peers, they might come home and take a bag of chips to their room. And that's where we needed parental involvement, right? What kinds of foods do you have in your home as a parent? What kinds of, do you stock your pantry with all kinds of crap, or are there healthy options available? So now we're getting into adolescence, between 12 and 18. And food behaviors are going to be pretty well entrenched by this time. And development is still going on. We don't have kids with fully developed frontal lobes here. They're not making the best decisions. In fact, teenagers are pretty much known for not making good decisions. But the role here, the job, according to Erik Erikson, the developmental task, is to experiment and develop identities and roles. So kids either work through this, and this doesn't, and more research has said, you know what, this identifying yourself goes well beyond this stage. So there's been some changes in this, but think of identity in terms of, am I a leader in the class? Do I participate maybe in, I take initiative and I start a flag football team, or maybe I'm the secretary for the school government, or maybe I organize the people who are going to be in the play, or maybe I just participated and I find out I'm not a natural leader, but I like to participate. These are all ways of figuring out who you are. What kinds of interests do you have? People start to think about, what do I want to do when I leave high school? What direction do I want to? Do I want to continue school? Do I want to go out in the world and work? What do I want to do? So it's establishing identity, right? Starting to establish and answer the questions, who am I? How do I want to dress? Am I an emo person? Am I a preppy person? I don't even know what the groups are anymore, but who am I? How do I want my appearance to be? What kind of things do I want to be involved in? Am I involved in agricultural things? I came from Iowa. A lot of people were in 4-H. Am I involved in sports? Am I involved in music? Am I involved in drama? Am I involved in rollerblading or skateboarding? Or what are my interests? Who am I? How about relationships, sexuality, all these things, political, social views, personality, interests are all continuing to develop here. And Erikson said that this is a period of uncertainty. Hello, you've met teenagers. confusion, exploration, experimentation, trying to figure out which way you want to go in life. So parents have a tough job here because the kid that may have been a straight A student is all of a sudden skipping class. It's just this experimental stage. So some kids, by the time they leave this later stage of childhood, this later stage of adolescence, have sort of figured some things out. But a lot of kids carry on this identity search well past the high school years. But that takes us into the 6th developmental stage, which is called early adulthood. And this is from 19 to 39. Now, this is a big span because I think most of us who have lived past that age would say that between 20 and 30, there's a whole lot of identity formation. It's like, okay, this is where I want to head in my career. I want to be a single adult. I want to be in a committed relationship. I want to be married. I want to be in a same-sex relationship. I want to have children. I don't want to have children. There's all of these things going on. But between 19 and 30, 19 and 29 is when that frontal developmental, the frontal lobe fully develops and we can start to make better decisions. We think beyond just the next hour and how much fun it's going to be and how good it's going to feel. And we start looking at there are consequences. Now, how a person gets through this stage can really help determine whether they've developed a sense of intimacy, whether they can have healthy relationships with other people, whether they can have good intimate relationships, whether they're going to be vulnerable, or whether it's going to be, this is do what I say, not what I do. I'm going to be a people person, a social person. I'm going to do things. And I don't mean extroversion or introversion. It's just I'm going to get out there and participate in life, or I'm going to kind of crawl in a hole and isolate because maybe I didn't get a lot of encouragement. So all those earlier stages can be seen now in adulthood. So the things you've learned about yourself, the way you've learned to use food. Some people develop eating disorders in these stages. Some people develop weight gain between 19 and 39. Some people, depending on what you're doing in your life, a lot of things change in this stage. And your previous stages are going to really determine a lot about where you are. Do you feel competent? Do you feel good about making decisions? Or are you a person who is really struggling with self-esteem, don't believe in your ability to take initiative, don't want to make any waves, don't want to share your ideas or your thoughts, don't want to cause any. All these things have led to where you are today. And this is also a time in life when people, if they're going to do this at all, start to go, wait a minute, this isn't who I want to be. This isn't where I thought I would end up. I don't like that I feel so insecure. I don't like that my self-esteem is so low. I don't like that I've developed bad habits with alcohol or shopping or spending or gambling or food. People start to figure out the trajectory that they have been on, what they have been taught by other people, the encouragement or lack of the encouragement that they've been given, not only as it relates to food, but all sorts of other things have come together now. And you're at a stage where most people say, this is just how it's going to be. Or, okay, I get how I got here. They start looking at the past to see how it's affected the present. This is what I do in my class Gain While You Lose. What's your relationship with food? Where did it come from? Where did it develop from? How do you react to other people? Are you a person who isolates? Are you a person who's aggressive to back people off? Our sense of self really shows here, whether we have a good sense of self-esteem or whether we don't have a good sense of self-esteem. And I will tell you, the people who do not have a good sense of self-esteem are those of us who, like me, was harming my body through starvation, was harming my body through alcohol, through pain medication, through not exercising, through not getting enough rest, through throwing myself into work and other activities and ignoring what was really important to me, because I had a lot of shame. I didn't feel okay about who I was. People who don't feel okay about who they are not treating themselves well. And I hate that, but it is true. And so those who find themselves at this stage of adulthood have an opportunity to say, wait a minute, this isn't who I want to be. I want to figure out where things went wrong, and I want to fill in those places. And you can do this at any time. You can do it at the next stage, the 7th stage, which is middle adulthood. You can do it in later adulthood. But for a lot of people, that journey to figuring out, well, this is who I ended up being because of all the things that took place in my life, but this is who I want to be. And so you have the opportunity to learn the skills you maybe didn't learn in the other stages. So between 19 and 40, basically, it's like, do I have a good sense of relationships, friendships, intimate relationships, or do I isolate from people and situations? And let's look at food. When it comes to food, if you've got unhealthy habits related to food, maybe you hide, you eat in secret, you're a binge eater, you develop an eating disorder, this is absolutely going to interfere with the job at this stage, was just develop healthy relationships, because you can't be having this unhealthy relationship with food and have a fully healthy relationship with other people. So then the next stage between 40 and 64 is really spent developing a sense of generativity, like I contribute to the world, I'm productive, I'm creative, I'm going to start working on what I want to leave behind, or stagnation. Think Archie Bunker, for those of you who are old enough. You go home and you sit in the chair at night and you don't do anything but watch TV. You're stagnated. You're not working on personal development. This is also a time in life when people are like, I don't like this relationship I have with food. I don't like the kinds of relationships I have with people. I don't like the way I interact with people. I'm defensive, or I'm aggressive, or I don't speak up for myself. I don't know how to set boundaries. I don't know how, because this is all from earlier stages. But you can learn them now. How? Take a class. Listen to the podcast. Get on Google. Learn these things, because it's not too late. And I'm telling you what, the people at this stage who take this on and say, I am going to become the person that I was born into this world to be, they are going to become generative. They are going to start leaving a positive legacy. They're going to mentor younger people. They're going to launch their children. They're going to help their children. They're going to, they're going to take on this positive role, and they're not going to be so self-focused. Now we're starting to share and help others, being involved with the community, providing mentoring, coaching, giving back. So that's between those stages, and we can always build ourselves up here. And then the last stage that he talks about is late adulthood, which is like 65 through the end of life. And the job people have here, according to Eric Erickson, is to assess their life. To assess, have I made meaningful contributions? Or am I in a state of despair because I have regrets and I'm sad about how I lived my life? So you can either have a sense of integrity, like, you know what, I didn't do it perfectly, but I've really made strides and I feel better about who I am, and I'm going to really let people know that, I love them, and I'm going to take as good a care of myself mentally, physically, spiritually as I can. Or a lot of people are in despair. They look at their life and they're like, I blew it. I blew it. So, integrity is a sense of self-acceptance, contentment with life, knowing most of my life is behind me and it's okay. Or a sense of despair. I don't feel fulfilled. I don't feel at peace. I'm not able to come to terms with my life. And that's not a good place to be. But at any one of these stages, we can improve. So those are the 8 stages. So the question is, how can we resolve some of these issues that obviously were sort of put upon us by the people who took care of us in our younger years? Well, let's talk about one of the ways you can learn to develop trust with food, all right? Self-trust. It's doing a little bit and having a little bit of success. It's doing a little bit and having a little bit of success. For example, you can learn at any stage of your life that it's okay to leave some food on the plate. I don't have to eat all of the food. I don't have to belong to the clean plate club anymore. It's okay. So I learned to trust myself not to overeat. I can leave some food on the plate. You can learn to refrain from taking a second serving of something. I developed trust that I can be satisfied with a serving of portion, a healthy portion of food, and I'm satisfied. You can learn to say no. No, thank you, I would not like that today. You can say yes. You can say yes and you can say no. And you can trust yourself to know when you've had enough or when you've, engaged in a little too much lately and it's time to just back off and take better care. You can ask for help. If you don't trust yourself to go to the grocery store or even make an online list, ask somebody to help you. I'm going to make a grocery list. I want you to look it over. You know what foods that are triggers for me. If you see anything, come back and, hold me accountable. Or send somebody to pick them up for you. Get help for what you need. You can learn to trust yourself by keeping trigger foods out of the house. So you can learn to trust yourself around food. You can learn things like autonomy. I can do this by myself. I'm independent. You can learn, like the toddlers, to realize that, yes, you can do it by yourself, but sometimes you need help. So as an adult who struggled with food, maybe some things you can learn to do by yourself and some things you still need help with. And both are okay. You can learn to take initiative. This is that 3rd stage, so you don't feel guilty. You take initiative by seeking out support when you need it. I need help from a bariatric dietitian. I need help from a bariatric coach. I need help from a personal trainer. I need help from a therapist. Decide you're going to be in charge of your journey, even if nobody else is going to do it with you. And you hear me say a lot, nobody can do this for you, but you can't do it alone. And that is the truth. And if your self-esteem has been damaged throughout life, you can learn to value yourself. Now, this is probably going to take the help of a therapist or a coach or a mentor. Because learning to let go of shame, that feeling that I'm not okay, that feeling that I'm not good enough, that I don't measure up, that people don't want to be around me because there's something wrong with me. It's a tough one to let go of. It's a tough one to turn around, but it can be done. The class that I teach online, Gain Weight Lose, that is what we spend a lot of the time doing. But losing that sense of shame, getting rid of the sense of inferiority and realizing, you know what? I was born into this world awesome, equal value to every other human that is in this world. Circumstances along the way. Maybe my parents were, helicopter parents and it stifled me. Or maybe my parents were overly frightened and didn't let me explore. I can do that today. And you can learn, along with valuing yourself and who you really are, to value your health. The more you value yourself, the more your value to yourself will be shown through how you exercise, eat, take care of yourself, the relationships you keep, all of those things. You can shore up your sense of self at any time. You can identify, these are my strengths, these are my weaknesses. I don't have to be perfect, and I'm going to draw on my strengths. I'm going to play to my strengths, and I'm going to do the things that I enjoy and am good at. And you know what? Sometimes I'll do things I suck at, but I'm not going to beat myself up. I'm just going to go out there and bowl and have fun and make a fool of myself. You can choose not to isolate out of shame, but allow yourself to be vulnerable. Talk to other people about how you feel, how you felt, how you've not felt good about yourself and how you're learning to feel good about yourself. Talk about your strengths, talk about your struggles, and get out there and live your best life, because by the end of your life, you want to have integrity. You want to say, you know what? I stumbled, I fell, and I got back up. There were times in my life I didn't feel good about myself, but I have made repair. And I feel okay about what I've done in my life, because I didn't want to end my life saying, I gave up, I gave in, I quit trying. I want to get to the end of my life saying, I never quit trying. Never got it perfect, but by God, I'm proud of the effort that I put in. You want to have integrity. That's what we're working toward. Life is a stage of development, different developmental aspects. So what I would encourage you to do with the information in this is to really give it some thought. And if you're curious, look up Erik Erikson's Stages of Development. I find tremendous value in these, and it's easy for me. Maybe it's because I've been schooled in this through education, but to see how these things play on one another over the course of a lifetime and how people end up where they end up. But we can always improve our situations. Oftentimes we need to ask for help. So what I would do is think about, what areas of my life do I need help in? Whether it's related to your ability to trust yourself with food, to say no, to set boundaries, to stand up for yourself and speak your mind. Find out through some self-meditation or contemplation what you need help doing to make your life better, to make you feel good about you. And then get the help that you need, because friends, we got one go around in this body in this particular lifetime. So let's make the most of it so we can have integrity when we are toward the end of our lives. So I hope you enjoyed this podcast episode. I love this topic, but I'm kind of a psych geek, so there you have that. I'd love to hear your feedback on this, and if you've learned anything about yourself, let me know. I appreciate your feedback, and I look forward to next week's episode, which I haven't figured out what that's going to be yet, but I do remember thinking there was another topic from the intuitive eating book that I wanted to get into. So I'm going to go search for that. I'll see you next time. Make it a good one. And remember, forever and ever, this is your health. This is your life. You are responsible for your health and your life this day and every day. So make some wise choices, friends. See you next time. Bye.